mute them again. It's going to be very moderated, I guess is the word.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
Not a problem. But yeah, if anything happens, we are not scared of just closing this meeting and reopening it if we need to.
Great. So it seems like all of the various pieces are in place. So we'll go ahead and get started if that works for everybody.
I just want to make sure a phone number just was added. Who is the phone number ending in 9440?
I'm muted too.
Let's see.
And whoever you are, your microphone is muted, and you can't.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, all right.
Probably Ralph. Is that Ralph?
Yeah, it's the outlaw.
Excellent.
Wonderful. All right. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Southern Vermont Young Professionals statewide candidate forum. This is part 1 of 2, where we are joined by candidates for representative to Congress, governor, treasurer, and state auditor. Our 2 moderators today are Christopher Lukasik, who works for the Windham County State's Attorney's Office, and John Pritchard, who works for Costello, Valente, and Gentry PC. My name is Casey Haynes. I work with the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. Christopher, do you want to introduce yourself?
Certainly. As Casey said, I work for the Windham County State's Attorney's Office. I live in Brattleboro. I am currently the Outreach Committee Chair for the Southern Vermont Young Professionals.
Yes, and I'm John Pritchard. I'm an associate attorney at Costello, Valente, and Gentry PC down in Brattleboro. I've been here for a couple of years now, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Southern Vermont Young Professionals. This should be a lot of fun. Thanks everybody for participating.
Absolutely. So I'll jump in with a few disclaimers, and then I will largely go quiet here. Please do note that questions asked here are not reflective of the Windham County State's Attorney's Office, the state of Vermont, Costello, Valente, and Gentry, Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, or the Southeastern Vermont Economic Development Strategies. We are here as part of our involvement with the Southern Vermont Young Professionals and to provide a forum for young professionals to get to know the candidates for public office. And thank you all again for being here. And with that, I'll turn it over to Christopher.
Few housekeeping rules, or Zoom keeping as you will. We welcome all questions, and there will be a question and answer session at the end. Please keep your questions until then, or put them in the Zoom chat. Please keep your microphones muted when someone is talking, as I completely detest when there's echoes on Zoom. And if you do become disruptive to the point that the Zoom event cannot move forward, we hold the right to eject you from the event. Our facilitator, Casey, will be in control of muting and unmuting people throughout the event. And I will tag in John.
And if you're meaning to talk and your microphone is muted, one of us will kindly remind you that you are muted to get it corrected. And finally, please, nobody engage in what they're calling Zoom bombing. We don't need any inappropriate stuff going on to derail this event. We're really looking forward to hearing what all the candidates have to say and introduce themselves. So we'd like to quickly run down this list and all of our topics so we can get all this done within the time allotted.
One more disclaimer, however, inclusion in this event is not an endorsement from the Southern Vermont Young Professionals or either the moderators, employers, or BDCC or SEVEDS. Inclusion in today's event was offered to all people who are going to be printed on the ballot.
Alrighty, and when we call your name, please give a 2-minute introduction of yourself and whatever you'd like to share. Casey will be monitoring the time and will be fairly ruthless with the mute button to make sure we stay on everyone's time limit so we can get through all the candidates. And you will have only one opportunity to speak at this point, but your name will be read off regardless if you're running it for multiple positions.
Like we said, everybody on the ballot will be read. I know not everybody is here. I will bring up the list of people who are here or have RSVP'd yes. But For representative to Congress, the people running are Miriam Berry from Essex, Chris Brimmer from Reigate, Ralph Corbo from Wallingford, and I know he's here, so if we can unmute him, that'd be great. Ralph, you're unmuted. Do you want to give an introduction?
Right. So this is for the office of U.S. House of Representatives.
It is, but you should just give a general introduction of yourself because this is your one opportunity for all the offices you're running for.
Okay, here we go. The biggest challenge for both Vermont and the U.S. is to break the power of the military-industrial congressional complex, which siphons off billions of federal tax dollars into a bloated Defense Department budget, depriving the state and the nation of much-needed program funding and grants. My experience of living under 12 presidential administrations has prepared me well for government service, including having lived through and studied state and national political history and having lived and worked among all peoples and segments of American society. And that's my introduction.
Excellent, thank you. Continuing on the list, there's Chris Erickson from Chester, Jimmy Rodriguez from Montpelier, Justin Tuttle from Pomfret, and Anya Tanio from Charleston, and I know Anya's here.
Yes, hello, thank you for having me. I'm Anya Tino, and I am running for United States House of Representatives to better serve the state of Vermont and Washington, and to represent our interests on the federal level. As a young professional myself, I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this forum, and I look forward to serving all professionals and business people who have been struggling very hard to grow their careers and find sustainable careers in the state of Vermont. I look forward to helping you with that. I am a constitutionalist. I believe very strongly in the Constitution. I believe in the Second Amendment, and I will fight for fiscal responsibility and lower taxes for business people in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thanks, Anya. And finally, running for U.S. Representative to Congress is Peter Welch from Norwich. So I'm going to tag in John to introduce the people running for governor.
Great, thanks, Chris. Running for governor first, you have Douglas Cavett of Milton. You could unmute Mr. Cavett, Casey.
Yep, there we go.
Okay, my 2 minutes. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I haven't really had a chance to have anybody understand where my background has, brought me to this point. So way back when I was 16, I started my service and leadership by starting the Safe Rides program, which is now nationwide. I was on Good Morning America and all sorts of things. In high school, I used to leave my classes routinely to be the EMT crew chief in charge of our town ambulance. I went off to Notre Dame at 17 in this same suit and studied pre-med and psychology. I ended up here in Vermont where my wife-to-be was going to school and ended up starting several programs, one of which started out of my Main Street apartment, which is for the Baird Center, a transitional program. I was a counselor, a teacher, a coach. I've been a sports nutritionist and a personal trainer, a master gardener. There's all sorts of different things that I've gone through as far as working towards my leadership abilities here, including my master's program at the University of Vermont, which was a master's in educational leadership, which is still in progress. But so that's where I'm coming from, and I'm really fighting for some criminal justice reform. We need to abolish the Vermont DOC as it is right now and replace it with a University of Wellness and Equity.
All right, great. Thanks, Doug. Next candidate for governor is Ralph Corbo of Wallingford, who we just recently heard from. Chris Erickson of Chester. Rebecca Holcomb of Norwich, who I believe is on here as well. Yep.
Hi, thank you for having me today. And it's been a pleasure actually to speak with some of the young professionals around Vermont in the last couple months. That's one of the advantages of being in COVID. You spend a lot of time talking to people. I served as Vermont Secretary of Education for 4.5 years. But before that, I have served as a teacher and as a school principal and as a district leader. I also am a small business owner, the owner of a small inn up in the Northeast Kingdom. It's been a pleasure to have the opportunity to meet with people around the state and hear their stories about what we need to focus on. And what I've heard in every community is that if we want Vermont to be a place where young professionals can live and thrive, we need to get to work on some of the problems that have been here before COVID and are still going to be here after. We need to have broadband in every part of the state. My own husband is a telecommuter. We chose where to live because of access to high-speed fiber. We need to make sure that is there in every community so people can choose where to live and be able to do work from home. We also need to turn into healthcare and bring down the cost and make sure it's accessible to everyone more than ever in this time of economic crisis. And we've learned that we need to turn into issues of paid family leave, particularly when we think about the fact that the frontline workers who are keeping us safe right now are disproportionately women and disproportionately low paid. And we need them to know that they can take care of their families and still take care of us as well and live well and be supported by us in our Vermont communities. Those are some of the issues, and I look forward to speaking today about economic development and other ways to make sure that we're taking care of Vermonters. So thank you for having me here today, and I look forward to the conversation.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. Next, we have John Clark of Brookfield. He's in the room. Bernard Peters of Irisburg. Emily Payton of Putney.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm Emily. I've been a environmental and social justice activist for 20 years. I've worked on introducing industrial hemp, and I've also worked on introducing public banking so that our monetary system in Vermont serves Vermonters, and we are able to give more loans to Vermonters at the direction of the legislature. Now, I've run for governor before, but those runs were just awareness runs. In other words, I wasn't raising money in a bona fide run the way I am now. Much more serious now is because of the trespasses upon our constitutional rights, our unalienable rights, which are there for very wise reasons. So my campaign is called Truth Matters, and it's looking at all the outcomes. So I'm going to mute myself because my dog is barking, and we'll move on to the next question. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Emily. We have, continuing on, we have Phil Scott of Burlington, Swiderski of Newberry, Patrick Whitburn of Bennington.
Yeah, hi, I'm Pat Winburn. I'm from Bennington, and I'm the only candidate for governor on the Democratic side, anyway, from Southern Vermont. I have been a professional. I've been a lawyer for the last 4 decades, and I've tried more than 75 jury trials in the state of Vermont, including Bennington County and Windham County and Windsor County, and really throughout the state of Vermont. I'm the past president of the Vermont Trial Lawyers Association and current member of the board of the Trial Lawyers Association. I've been listed in as a member of the best lawyers in America. And I am proud to be a lawyer. I'm proud to be a professional. And I'm proud to be from Southern Vermont. You know, I've been a lawyer. One of my heroes was Clarence Darrow, also Ralph Nader. There are a lot of lawyers who have done good things for people. And I pride myself in being, for the last 40 years, representing the powerless against the powerful. I'm a Main Street lawyer. I'm not a Wall Street lawyer. And my office is at 409 Main Street in Bennington, Vermont. I've served on a number of boards throughout my time in Vermont. I've been the past president of the United Way, past co-chair of the United Way Campaign Fund, member of the board of the Bennington Museum, and also I'm also the moderator of the Village of Old Bennington. And through all these experiences, I think that's what distinguishes me from the rest of the group that I'm running against on the Democratic side, is that I bring a different perspective to the job because I am a lawyer, and I'm also I'm a professional, and I see things the way lawyers see them. I think that you need critical thinking. If people have a problem, a legal problem, they call a lawyer.
Great, thanks, Pat. We cut you off there because you went over the 2 minutes, but thank you very much for introducing yourself. Next, we have David Zuckerman of Hindsburg.
Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. This group of young professionals and others around the state that I've had the opportunity to meet with in the past as I've traveled the state, both as lieutenant governor and even prior to being lieutenant governor, when I was a representative and a senator, I would still travel the state to get to meet folks and organize with folks around issues like the ones the young professionals care about, as well as the whole range that people who are young professionals care about. My name is David Zuckerman, as you said. I'm currently your lieutenant governor. I am a farmer, and as a small business owner, one who started a small business and built it from the ground up and deal with it on its day-to-day operations. And I'm a father, and I am running to be the next governor of Vermont. I began my campaign by talking about the need to really listen to Vermonters and address the challenges that folks are facing. When I entered the race, it was in January, and the discussion around the climate crisis, the economic challenges that a tremendous number of Vermonters are facing that have been exacerbated, as we know, by the COVID crisis. The desperate need for criminal justice reform, not just criminal justice reform, but the broader issue of racial disparity and economic wealth disparity and how folks are treated in our society, in our education system, and others. And really the need for a universal high quality education system that we've again noted under COVID-19 is not there for everyone. My idea, my campaign is about bringing people together as I have in public office for over 20 years. We've had roundtable conversations with teachers, childcare workers, agricultural leaders and farmers, climate activists, medical professionals, and business owners, and many others during this campaign. But again, that was a continuation of the work that I've been doing as a public servant for all of you for a very long time. I greatly appreciate the ability to talk with you today. I'm ready to bring my leadership. And I want to just wrap that you can visit my website, zuckermanforvt.com, to get involved. And I believe that's about 2 minutes.
Great, thanks, David. I'm going to hand it over back to Chris to go over the candidates for treasurer.
For state treasurer, we have Carolyn Whitney Brannigan of Georgia, Chris Erickson of Chester, and present here, Beth Pierce of Berry City.
Who would you like to go first? Oh, okay. The others present, I misunderstood that. Okay. So my name is Beth Pierce. I'm the current state treasurer. I've been treasurer since 2011, and prior to that, I was the state's deputy treasurer beginning in 2003. My career has been in government finance. I have over 42 years of experience in government finance. I've been an accounting manager, a financial operations manager, and a deputy comptroller, and as I said, a deputy treasurer, actually in 2 different states. And I'm proud of the work we've done. It's about excellence, and it's about helping the consumer. And my bottom line is to be able to make sure that we have economic prosperity in this state and an opportunity for everyone to have financial security. I am a very strong believer in working with the private sector. Our approach is to not to be replacing something that's already done, but to be additive. So we've done a lot of work in what I would call gap analysis, bringing in different folks. For instance, in our local investment committee, we had members of the credit unions, we had members of the banking association, we had also members of, that were professionals in the solar or renewable energy. And we ended up coming up with a $33 million program for what we call 10% in Vermont. So putting 10% of our dollars into local investments. We're very proud of that program. Right now, we're working on a program called the Green Mountain Secure Retirement Program, and it is a effort to bring retirement services to folks that don't currently have them, small businesses, businesses under 50 or less employees, and to provide a range of investment opportunities for those individuals and their employers. And we've gone around the state to put this program together. It was passed. We had a few problems.
Sorry, Beth, we have to cut you off. We could revisit if we have time at the end. And to list off the candidates running for auditor, John's going to run down those people.
Oh, thanks, Chris. And for auditor, we have Chris Erickson of Chester, Doug Hoffer of Burlington, and Linda Joy Sullivan of Dorset.
I don't believe any of those people have arrived. So we're going to get to the question part. Quick notes before we get to questions. As this is an off year for our 2 United States senators, no candidates for U.S. Senate are included in this event. And as I said earlier, throughout the event, if you have any questions that you would like to be asked during the moderated question and answer session, such as, Beth, what would you like to continue talking about? Put them in the chat and our facilitators will add them to the list. Either one of us could ask the question or you can ask it yourself. Please be sure to note whether you'd like to ask it directly. John?
Thanks, Chris. The candidates provided 4 questions prior to this event, and we'll work through those questions first, and then go on to the question and answer session from other participants. Candidates will be asked in a reverse order for the first question, and we'll flip the order for each question thereafter. The candidates will have 90 seconds to respond to a question, and because of the limited amount of topics, we're going to try to keep it as strictly as we can to that 90-second period.
And just to jump in, I had a suggestion to maybe be slightly less ruthless and chime in when there's about 10 seconds left. So I'll do my best to accommodate that. So
that is okay. And I want to thank David for highlighting his website, because we do encourage everyone to reach out to the candidates on their own after the event if they want to hear more, including visiting candidates' websites. John?
Thanks, Chris. The first question we're going to have is on housing. According to Vermont Housing Finance Agency, 50% of renters in Vermont are paying 30% or more of their household income on rent, with a vacancy rate of 3.4% and about 2.8% down here in Windham County. If you were elected, what is your primary plan to address this particular issue? Or what role do you see yourself playing to help address this particular issue? And let's hear first from Beth Pierce.
Beth, can you unmute yourself?
I'm sorry, I was in the middle of doing a chat question and I apologize, but could you please repeat the question?
Certainly. According to the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, 50% of renters in Vermont are paying 30% or more of their household income or rent, with a vacancy rate of 3.4%, with 2.8% in Windham County. If you're elected, what is your primary plan to address this issue, or what role would you play in after you are elected and to help address this particular issue?
Well, thank you for the question, and my apologies for the repeat there. We actually have already begun work in the housing area. We were asked by the legislature to prepare a housing finance report, which we delivered last January. And before that, we had a public hearing on the issues, attended some hearings that the legislature was having as well. And we put together a series of financing and funding options to address this, ranging from rehabilitation to new housing, and working with Vermont Housing, the VHCB. We also work very closely with VHFA. One of the issues is the gap between between development and the dollars that are required to be a functioning operation. And we are working on those issues. We're also taking a look at the issues around housing for the homeless population, other special needs populations, including disability. And it was a very comprehensive report. We're looking forward to implementing those things. We had hoped to have a few more public hearings in March, but something called COVID got in the way. And our hope is that we can continue that process and be a partner in identifying
10
those
seconds.
issues. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Beth. Can we hear from Mr. Zuckerman next, please?
There we go. I hope I can start now. Thank you for the question. And affordable housing is a huge issue in Vermont and clearly exacerbated in Southern Vermont. And we can't just build affordable housing that's allowed to then be resold at the full free market price. We in Vermont face market pricing that is pressured by the Boston, New York, New Jersey markets. And we're seeing that right now with the COVID crisis, with folks willing to move to these rural areas, sometimes sight unseen, to purchase. So we have to put in place some constraints on housing prices and or ways and opportunities for people, including expanding home share, a great program that a lot of folks are unaware of. But when you have fixed income seniors in larger homes with extra rooms, they can rent a room to someone like a young professional and actually not have it count against their income for their property tax relief for education funding. And they could have lower rents so that young professionals getting started with lower incomes could have a chance to get their feet under themselves. But the big backbone of a lot of my campaign is the Green Mountain New Deal. The idea that the Trump tax cuts have primarily gone to the wealthiest 5%. And if we were to tax them for about half of the Trump tax cuts, we could invest $100 million in perpetually affordable housing, expanding rural broadband, weatherizing seniors and fixed income folks' homes, as well as low income folks' homes, so that working class people can start to lower their housing costs and their utilities. Happy to get into more of that later. Thank you.
All right, thanks, David. Ms. Rubenberg, can you go next, please?
Okay, can you hear me? Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, you're all set. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Well, affordable housing impacts virtually every part of state government. It's a health issue. It's a corrections issue because we're keeping people in prison who are eligible for release. And it's an economic development issue because working families can't afford to move here. And it's a human rights issue because our homeless population is climbing and many cannot exist in the shelters. Just as Governor Scott originally shirked his duty to mandate masks statewide, he's done the same by allowing municipalities to handle short-term rentals themselves. Companies like Airbnb have certainly had a negative impact on affordable housing, and the lack of regulation is really bad. I mean, we need to make major investments in affordable housing, and we need to do it now. Many larger, older homes could be converted to rental units, but we need to establish incentives for that. And so I'm committed to providing more housing, and I'll be appointing an affordable housing advocate to my transition team so that this is a focus of my administration. I want every commissioner to keep housing issues on the forefront as we shape policy.
Oh, technical issues. Thanks, Pat. Ms. Payton, can you go next, please?
Yes, thank you very much. This is such an important issue. And first of all, my website is myname.com. Another website is hempstonevillages.org and hempfullygreen.org. Ever since 2010, I have been advocating and sharing and educating about the use of hemp as a building material that is substantially superior to our materials on the market, in that it will provide a material that actually sequesters carbon, is fireproof, is mold proof, it can be built by the community, is long lasting, and as I said, it sequesters about 38 pounds per cubic foot and is non-toxic. So in my efforts to interest the legislature and to interest the Vermont Economic Development Association in investing in this, no one has responded. So moving forward, I am working with people who are willing to use this hempcrete, and in my company, we have developed a modular hempcrete home that can be moved and expanded upon. And what I see moving forward is using the tie-ins in the trailer parks to create homes that are not only sustainable, but that also
10 seconds.
are healthy. There's so much on this topic. Please reach out to me. It's so important. A home is a right.
Great, thank you, Emily. Ms. Holcomb, can you go next, please?
Thank you. We have an acute shortage of affordable housing, particularly for families. And I remember speaking to a mother just a couple weeks ago who had lost her home and had just moved into 2 rooms with her teenagers into someone else's house. And she actually said, how could I tell my children to live here when they grow up? So we need to address this. We need to address this to make sure we do have a workforce in the next generation. And there are many ways we can do this. First of all, I would start by fully funding the Vermont Housing Conservation Board consistent with the statute. And I also would make sure that we paid attention to equity. We know that about 70% of white households own their own homes, but only about 21% of Black and brown Vermonters own their own homes. We need to make sure that when we implement policy, we're mindful of the history of discrimination in housing and in mortgage markets in ways that make sure we're equitable in our outcomes. We need to expand assistance programs that help income-eligible first-time home buyers make down payments on their first homes. We need to support policies related to form codes so we can get going quickly. And I absolutely agree. We need to collect better data on Airbnb in the state. We know that in some communities like Woodstock, over 50% of the housing stock is now in short-term rentals or second homes. This has acute downstream impacts on schools and on the wealth and the vitality of every community. So we need to be working comprehensively to address that. And I look forward to working with the treasurer to figure out how to finance it.
Great, thanks, Rebecca. Mr. Corbo, please, can you go next?
As a combination candidate for this type of thing, we need funding, obviously. Takes money. Unfortunately, priorities at both the federal and state level a lot of times are all screwed up. Got a federal level, you got a $741 billion defense budget. I propose a 50% cut in that. Divide that by 50 states, going to be getting back $6 billion to the state of Vermont. There's a heck of a lot we can do for affordable housing. Then at the state level, we could raise the minimum wage, give the renters more income so that they can keep up with the pace of these rental increases. If we're looking for funding within the state, as been mentioned before, we could raise the personal income tax rate on the top 5% of Vermonters. We could also end the capital gains tax exclusion for the top 5% or 10% of Vermonters. We can enact a financial assets tax of 0.5% on all stocks, bonds, trusts, and other financial instruments over $2 million. And also increase the sales tax on low mileage SUVs and other gas guzzling vehicles, and reduce it on gas sipping and energy efficient cars like hybrids.
Seconds.
That should do it.
Great, thanks, Ralph. Mr. Kavik, can you go next, please? Mr. Kavik, you're still muted.
You may have to unmute yourself there.
I did it again. How are we doing now?
Great.
Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for everybody with the ideas. The solutions is really what we need. And that comes from discussions like this, and we have a whole bunch of different good ideas out on the table. And I think we need to start focusing on it. Unfortunately, this is kind of a case of the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. I was just in the market trying to find an apartment in Burlington, and I had to leave. I couldn't afford it. There was no way that I could afford an apartment in Burlington. And they were going so quickly that by the time you get there, there's already somebody else who's already, secured a deposit and whatnot. And so it's very frustrating, to be quite honest with you. I think there's a couple different things we need to do. We need to provide incentives for our contractors to build affordable housing. And when I say affordable housing, not housing that's built to look like affordable housing and then made into luxury units and sold off to the, the people that can afford it anyways. And also there's a possibility that maybe because of simple supply and demand economics here, if we have such a demand and such a small supply, why can't we put an incentive on people that own rental units to maybe not raise their rents for so many years in order to receive a tax credit?
10
I think
seconds.
those are two viable things we could do.
Great, thanks, Doug. Ms. Tinio, please. Can I hear from you next?
There we go. Yes, thank you. So the affordability crisis that the state of Vermont faces plays into this problem. And it wasn't so long ago that a professional person with a regular income could afford to not only rent a home, but buy a home and pay it off with a 30-year mortgage, etc., and have those things. We have to also be aware of the fact that Act 250 and the Global Warming Solutions Act will negatively affect this problem. As businesses and companies and homeowners and landlords have to pay more in order to maintain or build or have their properties, the rent will automatically go up. We have many properties in the state of Vermont that are being not utilized due to a variety of problems. We have affordability problems with heat, electric, the cost of living in the state is very high, and all of this plays in. As a federal candidate from a federal level, what I'm looking to do is make affordability happen through lower taxes for the working class and for businesses. We have to grow our economy in order to correct this problem. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to pass it off back to Chris, who asked our second question. It's about childcare.
I'm going to put it on the screen for everybody to see. According to Let's Grow Kids, 3 out of 5 of Vermont's youngest children don't have access to the childcare they need. The U.S. Census Bureau estimates that approximately 71.5% of Vermont children under the age of 6 have all available parents in the labor force, meaning they're likely to need some form of childcare while parent is working. This means approximately 21,225 children under the age of 5 in Vermont are likely to need some form of childcare. If elected, what will be your primary policy to increase the access of affordability of childcare? Or, in the alternative, what role do you see yourself playing in increasing the access and affordability? And why does your primary suggestion on the state or federal level that can accommodate childcare needs in a remote work environment? We are going to go in the opposite order we just did. So, Anya.
Thank you. So childcare affordability is a huge crisis, especially for single working parents who are forced to choose between going to work and having payment of childcare. This is a crisis that the state faces. Even in 2-income households, oftentimes one income goes to the childcare costs. As it stands now, almost an entire person's income is paying just for childcare. Now, in order to make this more affordable, we do have to focus on the fact that, of course, a childcare provider does need to be paid a substantial wage for doing this and have a living wage. But we also need to look at what is driving the costs up. Is it the distance that people are traveling to work? Is it time spent in the childcare facility? Is it the fact that the parent needs more childcare that is available from family or friends that are able to help them out? All of these things need to be looked at. And I think that it's very important to note that when we're talking about childcare in the post-pandemic world, we do need to make sure that these facilities are protecting our children from infection. We don't want childcare facilities and school systems to become super spreaders of the virus within our communities and to have a tragic effect. So I do believe that costs are going to probably be a little more difficult in the post. Okay, we'll do this later. Thank you.
Thank you, Anya. Douglas.
Oops, did I get on or not?
You're all set.
Good.
All right, thank you. So first of all, we just heard about the minimum wage, and obviously, we've been talking about a minimum wage of $15 an hour for so long that by the time it ever passes, we'll need to go to $20 an hour. In fact, we probably already have to. So our childcare workers, which are somewhat essential workers, as we've seen during this COVID crisis, as I have worked every day during this crisis, and I watched many parents have to juggle their schedule in a panic all of a sudden because they had no childcare. And, they couldn't come to work, one parent, deciding which parent was going to work and which parent wasn't going to work. So, let's address some real basic things. I don't think the childcare workers get $15 an hour. And if they're not, let's do something about it. I was fortunate enough to be on the board of directors of the Milton Family Center. And I created a infant and toddler program for my son, and then helped create a preschool program for him. But I was also allowed to bring him to work with me. So I avoided all of those technicalities, but it was, it was difficult. And this is what people are going through right now. So I think what we really need to do is make sure that childcare is available, because childcare is the ultimate equalizer for people of poverty and people that are lacking in other, educational type needs. So we really need to take the money out of DOC and give it to the children.
Thank you, Doug. Ralph?
I'll address this from the federal level. A little modern history lesson for everybody. On March 17, 2020, 130 U.S. House of Representative members petitioned the House Armed Services Committee asking to once again use taxpayer dollars to purchase 98 more F-35 nuclear bomber jets from Lockheed Martin at a cost of approximately $80 million each. In the 21st century, the federal government has chosen to invest massive amounts of money into preparing for and waging endless phony wars for endless military-industrial corporation profits while neglecting public health, education, and other domestic priorities, all the way down to the level here of Vermont. When are we going to see the elephant in the room of why we have all these problems, including a very critical problem of childcare?
Thank you, Ralph. Rebecca.
You. As a mother, I'm acutely aware of the potential long-term implications on lifelong earnings of people who not having access to childcare. And I also know as an educator that this is the single most important investment we can make, particularly in our less economically advantaged families. So many of you know that the population of our school system has been shrinking, but also how important our schools are to our communities. You also may know that we have models here in Vermont of how we could think differently to make sure that we're sharing resources in ways that make more opportunity for kids. A third of the cost of childcare is usually in overhead. We also know that in many of our school districts, we're starting to see schools partner with private providers or set up their own childcares in ways that make sure that our buildings are thriving, but that we're bringing down the overhead cost of care so that we can raise the wages of our workers and fill those buildings up and make sure families have the access they need. I spoke to one parent in one community who used to spend $185 a week to get childcare, and she has to pay it because she's a single professional mom. But now, because of this new partnership, she's only paying $50 a week. That means we're leaving $135 in her pocket every week. And I asked her why that was important to her, and she said, it's how I made a down payment on a house. We can do this as Vermonters, but we need to learn how to work together across sectors to make good use of what we've got and then fund it so we can make the difference we need to make for families. And also, I just have to put in a plug for paid family leave, because if we had paid family leave, parents could spend the first months of their child at home with their
Chris, you're muted. Unmute yourself, buddy.
Thank you. Next is Emily Payton.
Hi. I'm in this race because I'm offering a pivot point. We're hearing crisis after crisis after Ralph is speaking of them, and all we have is crises. And the fact is that our political system has failed us, not because it doesn't have good people in it, perhaps because of the bureaucracy that's so much larger than leaders than we can elect. So they do things like provide housing for homeless at $6 million for 15 300 square foot units. So when we're talking about the children, they are our future. And I'm proposing neighborhood councils, people's assemblies to return power to the people with the power to fund what we want. So we need not only a people's exchange, a public bank, the method so that the power to fund the things that we need is in the hands of the people, so that we can also call into account the some 8,000 state employees who really have it sweet, but have a reverse incentive. In other words, if they got the job done, they would be out of a job. And this is the problem. Vermont cannot afford our bureaucracy. So let's work together. Our children are our future. We need a sustainable future. It is why I'm here, so we can transform how we do governance.
Thank you, Emily. Patrick.
Well, I think elected officials have failed in investing in a system that works for all Vermonters. Lack of funding has resulted in crazy wait lists for quality programs in an unfair system that leaves kids behind. During the pandemic, the state has required families to pay 50% of a child's tuition if they want to keep their spots. And this is really unfair to lower income families who may have lost their jobs through no fault of their own. We're living in a new reality, and as governor, I'll not only expand universal pre-K, but ensure we have a system that can survive the current crisis and the economic downturn that comes with it. It will take money and creativity and a willingness to listen to both families and providers who do the work. COVID-19 has exposed the flaws that already exist in our system, I believe, and the brunt is borne disproportionately on women and people of color. 2 highly regarded child care facilities have already closed during the pandemic, and it's probably just the beginning. And I agree with Let's Grow Kids that COVID-19 relief funds should be targeted to address child care as an economic workforce development issue. I mean, how underfunded are some of our centers? Many have already, been ready to reopen, but they
10
can't.
seconds.
Due to lack of cleaning supplies. And I just don't think this makes sense.
Thank you, Patrick. David?
Thank you, Patrick. I really appreciate it. Can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I must have tapped it twice. My apologies. So this issue is very near and dear to my heart. My mom, when I was a kid, worked on elevating early childhood education as part of an integrated system with the schools. And I'm really glad that some of my opponents are talking about that integration today. I've been speaking about it for quite some time, where we can really incorporate various aspects of our society into our community schools, from early child care to also looking at human services resources that are not really available to everybody because those services are 40 and 50 miles away. Some of those services include child care financial assistance program, which the legislature has worked to increase. The governor's been in the way of, and it's actually led to some of the savings that were talked about earlier by one of the other speakers. We need to recognize that our system as it currently exists is inequitable and it's underfunded. And we have to make sure that not only do we fund programs like the child care financial assistance program, but also the TEACH program, teachers' education and compensation helps, where those early educators are not just child care centers, they're educators. We know the impact on these kids from 0 to 3 and 4 in terms of socialization and educational opportunity is critically impacted by their life and circumstances from 0 to 4. So we need to reconceptualize all of this and make sure that we also pay these folks well enough. It's unacceptable their wages are so low. We do have to raise the minimum wage, which again, the current governor has vetoed multiple times.
Missed our 10-second mark, sorry.
No, that's fine. I would just say fundamentally at the end, we have to improve progressivity in our taxation. The wealthiest have had huge tax breaks, and that has led to the underfunding of all of these issues.
Thank you, David. And finally, Beth.
I am muted. Okay, there we go. So thank you very much. I think the first thing I want to say is children need to be safe, and they need to have a safe environment to grow and to learn, and that should be the priority of the state, because it's linked to housing, it's linked to economic development, it's linked to so many things. If we have a proper childcare, safe childcare. The second piece I would say is that childcare workers, and it's been said before, they're making a very low amount of money, income, and we need to change that because we want to bring in more folks into this profession, and I do believe it's a profession. It's a very specialized skill, not one that I have, by the way, and have a situation where those folks can thrive. Third, it's an economic development issue because they allow people to go to work. And when people have adequate income, they buy goods and services, and they are part of the economy, and they are an economic generator for the state. Finally, I'd just like to point out that we have been working in this area. We did a grant, a loan to the Community Development, the Community Loan Fund to assist in some daycare facilities. Now, the problem with it is it wasn't enough, and loans versus grants, loans have to be repaid. And for me, we need to have more grants in this piece, a combination of loans and grants. So for me, economic generator, the right thing to do, and let's do more.
Thank you, Beth. I'll be handling the third question, which, let me make sure it's on the screen, is on diversity. So from 2010 to 2018, Vermont attracted just 8,548 international immigrants, fewer than all but 3 states. With projections showing a steady population decline in the state, what would be your primary policy that you would propose to create a culture of welcoming to the diverse newcomers of Vermont and their needs and the need for an economically and culturally robust population? I apologize, I clearly read that wrong. If you need me to repeat it, I can. Similarly, what role do you see yourself playing in creating a culture of welcoming the diverse newcomers of Vermont and the needs for an economically and culturally robust population? Flip the order we just went. So Beth, you're up.
Sure, thank you very much. First, we need to address this because, again, as you mentioned, we have a shrinking workforce, and that means a shrinking economy. And it's also, again, the right thing to do to bring folks in and have them experience Vermont. We need to work with our institutions to provide adequate housing, legal services for immigrants so that they can thrive in our economy. One of the things we've done is on our financial literacy area, try to work with new Americans. We've done some work with various community development agencies, and we're proud of that work. Again, we need to do more. I have one person dedicated to financial literacy. I would hope that through the legislative process, we can increase it. And by the way, the funding for that is also the private sector in a partnership. For me, this is about, again, doing the right thing, finding ways to do additional financial resources and provide appropriate legal services, housing services. It's all interlinked. It's part of our economic prosperity, and we need to do more. And our office will continue to work on the financial literacy programs and other incentives. That Green Mountain Secure Retirement Plan that we have for small businesses can help with that. And I'm also on the Agricultural Assistance Corporation, population, and we need to do more to assist with farming and provide opportunities for all folks.
Perfect timing. David.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. For one, how we can look towards the future is also some of what we've done in the past. As Lieutenant Governor, I've been a real leader welcoming people into the State House, reaching out across the state to communities across a wide range of spectrum. We've had Indigenous people leading their efforts in the State House out of the Lieutenant Governor's office. We've had folks from across different walks of life using the Lieutenant Governor's office as a home base in the State House when they've come to testify, a safe space to gather their thoughts. Immediately after some of the racist issues that came up with this president's being inaugurated, we put up all our welcome outside my office to make sure folks felt welcome in the democratic process. We have to look at all of our privileges being white. We need to be reevaluating our internal biases, our benefits from a white supremacist society for 400 years. We obviously work hard to get what we get, but also there are incredible benefits from that white people have advantaged from slavery through the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. I encourage people to see that movie, 13th, as well as the GI Bill and more. We have to do more to expand the Office of Racial Equity. We have to work to reform some of our police and public safety funding towards mental health counselors and de-escalation techniques. And we have to expand the things that families really want: affordable housing, $15 minimum wage, weatherization, broadband, and good public schools, which are the things that folks want across all races and genders. And it isn't always a specific issue to a group, it's everybody's needs in that regard.
Thank you, David. Patrick?
Well, I think everything that's good about our country can be attributed to diversity. The mixing of cultures and of ideas really stimulates creativity and stimulates economic development. Most of us are immigrants at one point, but I was horrified by some of the discourse around Rutland welcoming Syrian refugees a few years back. The fear-mongering and racism displayed really was a black mark on our state. And the fact is, we need immigrants more than they need us. Unless we can boost our population, Vermont will struggle as our workforce ages out. But, bringing on, our welcoming place entails teaching more than Ethan Allen and European history in schools. There's an entire world we need to embrace. It's about celebrating different cultures, learning new languages, and being willing to change. And we need to create an affordable housing. We need to create affordable housing and workforce development opportunities and mutual aid support systems that let newcomers transition as seamlessly as possible. And we can have a new Vermont that can be both inclusive and preserve our unique culture. And, for one, I hope we don't have
10
to
seconds.
Thank you, Patrick. Emily?
I did. Hi.
Here we go.
And so where I want to start is as a woman leader, I bring a different nuance to the governorship. And I want to say that there's a lot of people who will talk, but I've always been known as a doer. So here are 3 things that we will do that will help in the time allotted here. Number 1, we will move to a primarily restorative justice system, and we will do this through the power of the people being amplified through these neighborhood councils and people's assemblies. Number 2, we begin with the youngest of our people, the kindergarten age, and we begin a cultural exchange program, a cultural partnering program with people of color through their whole lifetime in the school, so that from the very youngest age, we can begin to encourage lifetime friendships, melting down those ideas that a different culture is anything but delightful. Then we move to the Hempstone Villages idea. Now, these Hempstone Villages, we will open at least 5 at once. They're member-run, not-for-profit sustainable villages where people can come to learn the tasks of
10 seconds.
sustainability, and also that we can have a safe community for people to bring children and to be here, and also for tourists to come. Thank you very much for the question.
Thank you, Emily. Who's next? Rebecca.
Like that dog, it's a Vermont voter, I hope. The first thing we all need to do is vote for Joe Biden for president so we can get started on very long overdue and responsible immigration reform. And we also need to end the torrent of racist language coming out of the White House, because we've seen that that is having downstream effects even here in the state of Vermont. I have committed to approaching every policy that comes through my office through the lens of equity and the lens of sustainability. I did that because I know that if we want to change the change that we need here in Vermont, we need to stop thinking of diversity and inclusion as add-ons and start instead thinking them as core values that we work to support through every single aspect of state government. I talked with one of my endorsers recently, Curtis Reed of the Vermont Partnership for Fairness and Equity, about this challenge. You may know him, and what he said is that we have a real opportunity here in the state, particularly in the current COVID crisis, to encourage Black and Brown Vermonters or people to come here. And the way we need to do it is to invest in good schools, good childcare, good jobs, making sure there's good opportunities in healthcare in our communities. But we also have to be careful, because what we did, for example, in childcare, the way we regulated it is we pushed many of our new Americans out of our childcare market because they weren't comfortable working with us as the way we are. So we need to evaluate every single policy that comes through the lens of equity to make sure it is responsive and it is helpful to the communities we care about.
Thank you, Rebecca. Ralph?
This is a pretty tough issue. I lived through and continue to live in the Rutland County area and saw firsthand the real controversy that went down here a few years back with the group that emerged called Rutland First, mimicking, I believe at that time, the Republican national campaign of U.S. First. It seems like, and I remember I did the research and found like barely a dozen people in this county that were the ones that pushed that agenda of Islamophobia here, and yet they were able to inflame that fear in a vast majority of the county, and wound up not only defeating it in terms of their referendum vote, but even ousting a mayor of Rutland over it. So it's pretty amazing what a handful of a dozen people can do on something like that. I think what could have counteracted it was maybe, I don't know, I can't remember who the governor was at that time. Maybe could have rolled up his sleeves and got a little more involved coming down here, and maybe trying to have dialogue and meetings with both the pro and con groups, and try to disseminate the fear, that the unfounded fears that were being flamed down here.
Seconds.
I mean, there was even a study done that I believe those people saw, that a national study, that an influx of foreign immigrants.
Sorry, Ralph, we have to cut you off. Doug. You're still unmuted, Doug. Let's see if we can unmute. Hold on.
Yes, I think, Doug, you have to unmute yourself there.
Yeah, I just don't have the option until it pops up. So thank you very much. I think this is a great issue. First of all, I work at Rhino Foods in Burlington, probably the most diverse working environment that we have in Vermont. It's absolutely awesome. There's about 6 different languages being spoken all the time, all at once, and everybody is able to communicate with each other and have a really wonderful time. A little shout out to my buddy Saeed. His band, A to VT, Africa to Vermont, is fantastic, uplifting, joyous music that talks about working together in his hometown of Winooski and everything else. The diversity really does help Vermont. I took students all around the world, And we literally went from Belize to France to Portugal to Africa. We were everywhere. And those students got the best understanding of what a diverse culture was really about. And when they got back here, their lives were changed forever. I was fortunate enough to have a father who, brought us to Costa Rica when I was a young child, and we traveled through Central America and all over the place. And he was always looking at different cultures in a positive way. And unfortunately, we've done some negative things here in Vermont. We ruined our EB-5 thing just because we weren't ready to hold our own government officials accountable. The judge, basically let them go.
10 seconds.
And I've also seen, a sheriff admit this in a diversity class at UVM, that they were told to pull over people of color. We need to stop that.
Thank you, Doug. Anya?
Thank you. So first of all, I'll quickly go back to the childcare issue. What I didn't get to say was I would focus on that from an affordability standpoint in Washington. And now on to this. I believe that minority families want the same thing that all families do. They want good houses, good schools for their children, a good paying job, and the chance to live the American dream. The first and foremost important thing for that is to become an American citizen so that you can fully enjoy what America has to offer. That can only be fully enjoyed by American citizens. Vermont has always been very welcoming, and I do think that it's important to know that people had some legitimate concerns about who's coming in and how well they were being vetted, and that is probably what the gentleman was speaking about. I think that, again, good paying jobs and all of these things attract people to our state. And being a legal citizen in the United States will provide them with the opportunities that they need to move forward. Under the current presidential administration, Black and Hispanic unemployment was at record lows. So I do believe that we are working towards having everybody be able to hold jobs that they can be proud of, that they can support their family on. And we are working towards that on a nationwide level, which in turn will help the state of Vermont as well. I am all for having legal immigration come into our state and our country.
10 seconds.
We do need to make sure that it's legal immigration. Thank you.
Thank you, Anya. And that wraps up that question. So I'm going to tag in John for our last, pre-sent question, which will be on police reform.
Great, thanks, Chris. Criminal justice and policing reform have been very popular discussions over recent months due to the continued demonstrations throughout the state and the country. As a matter of fact, there was one in Brattleboro yesterday evening for this exact same issue. Now, if there was support to reallocate resources dedicated to policing and to redistribute those resources to more social services platforms, how would you implement that process? And what is your primary suggestion on how to reallocate those resources? Or what role do you see yourself playing in your position in allocating these various resources around to other areas? And what is your primary suggestion on how to relocate those resources? Anya, can you go first, please?
Yes. So I believe that people confuse police reform and criminal justice reform with defunding. We do not need to defund the police. We do not need to take funds away from the police department to give to programs. If there is going to be a new program added, we will have to look into funding that separately. There is no part of the police force that I am comfortable with saying we no longer need this or we no longer need that, or we could do with a pared down version of that. In order to keep our citizens safe, we need to have fully funded police forces, and so I will not support taking funds away from law enforcement to move into other programs. Other programs would have to be looked at separately to fund them separately, in my opinion. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Anya. Doug, can you go next, please?
Sure. Am I on yet or no?
Yep.
Okay, great. So first of all, criminal justice reform obviously is my stronghold. And we need to get rid of DOC the way it is. The Department of Corrections is a complete failure and always has been. And this century alone, we've dumped $3 billion, $3 billion into something that our state law, 28 VSA 1B, and their own policy, 371 4.2, both say that they neither rehabilitate nor reform, but cause the risk of more crime in our neighborhoods. So what are we doing funding this organization? I have no idea. It's insanity. What we need to do is come up with the same thing that I have been talking about, a university of wellness and equity, because the most marginalized people are the ones that are incarcerated. And we need to bring them opportunity, education, and an opportunity to come out and be the citizens, because it even says in those laws that their whole idea is to create somebody that is not a productive citizen. So in that regards, we need to really reform everything in the Department of Corrections. As far as the police goes, why don't we try just changing their name? Why don't we call them peace professionals? And you know, with the change of language, we can change the thoughts, the beliefs, the attitudes, and therefore the behavior.
10 seconds.
And give them the resources so they don't have to throw everybody to the judge.
Great, thanks, Doug. Ralph, can you answer this question next, please?
Yes, there is a very good reason for calling for the defunding of the police. Just off the top, all this surplus military equipment through the Pentagon program that was implemented back in the late 1990s through, I believe, I can't remember the exact act, but it had Section 1033 that allowed the Pentagon to do this. While the equipment does not technically have to be purchased by the state and local police departments, they do have to pay for the shipping of it, which is a fairly large bill there. So right off the bat, there's a point of defunding that needs to be addressed, because also we have to put a total ban on any appropriations of military equipment from the Pentagon by state and local police departments. That has to go. As U.S. House of Representatives candidate, if elected, you can be sure I will end that program pronto. At the state level, we have to make sure we have H496 and H808 passed by the Vermont legislature.
Great, thanks, Ralph. Rebecca, can you answer the question next, please?
Hi, yes. I have a good friend who works in criminal justice reform in Vermont, and she told me that when she first walked into Woodside, every single child she saw there was Black, and her thought was, how could this be in a state this white? And she was right to worry. We know that racial disparities in Vermont's prison system are among the worst in the nation. And we also know that a study recently by the International Association of Chiefs of Police, it was done in Bennington, and it's a professional association, found that the department had what they characterized as a warrior mentality. What we're forgetting is the vision of policing as public safety. And if the public doesn't feel safe, it isn't public safety. But this isn't just about people of color and people who live in poverty. And it isn't just about police. It is also about our correction system. We know that people with disabilities and people who live in poverty, people who have mental health challenges, and people with disabilities are all overrepresented, both in our school discipline data and in our prison system. It's really hard to look at our data and not worry that we are criminalizing people for being poor, being sick, being disabled, and being Black at a price of almost $70,000 a year. So as governor, I would work to invest in strong community-based mental health so people got mental health care when they need it, health care so that if they needed treatment for addiction, they were treated for addiction and not just put in jail where you can't be treated for addiction, for bail reform so people aren't held in prison so that they're because they can't afford to make bail, and for parole reform, and for housing to make sure people aren't in jail because we don't have enough housing in the state. That's what we need to do. And if we do that, we'll be able to solve problems in ways that don't require the same kinds of investments in law enforcement.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. Emily, can you address this question next, please?
Yes, once again, we're dealing with such an enormous injustices, and we all have been living with the stress of a system, a gigantic political corporate system that doesn't work for us. So what I represent is a chance to pivot to a transformation. Let me bring forward once again the work on the Hemstone villages. You could take one of those villages, one of those member-run villages, and dedicate it to people who would be going through the restorative process. And instead of sitting in a jail cell from a criminal justice industry, they will be able to learn to build out their own homes, grow their own food, become independent in ways that they never could within the jail system. And our state would be securing carbon in the houses they build and providing more food. So when you ask a woman to be governor, a woman who knows how to be resourceful and creative and methodical and nonviolent and peaceful and inclusive of the people, for we are the people, we are the government. Now it is time for us to decide, have we had enough of being failed and oppressed by a system of injustice? Are we ready to step forward and transform? That's the leadership I'm offering
10
you.
seconds.
Collaborating with the David Zuckermans, with the Doug Kavitz, with all the people here, rather than competing.
Sorry to cut you off, Emily, but we were on past the 90 seconds. Patrick, can you address this question next, please?
Sure. I think we need to rethink the role of policing in Vermont as well, really the whole United States. And that means we have to have some hard discussions. Vermont is not a diverse state, and statistics show we are not immune to the systemic racism that exists in police departments and other institutions. Just recently, a Black man was left to die in one of our correctional facilities due to lack of care. Making arbitrary cuts to police departments can have unintended consequences, but we should consider whether in some cases, social workers, drug counselors, and mental health care professionals are better to respond to some calls than uniformed police. If you embed some of these positions into departments, you'll begin to see the culture change and we'll have better outcomes. We need implicit bias training. It should be mandatory for anyone working in law enforcement. And we should set up citizen oversight boards to have independent accountability.
Great, thanks, Pat. David, can you address this question next, please?
Sure, thank you. I think first we have to look at how much we spend in law enforcement and incarceration. We put more money into incarceration than we do into our state colleges. We need to be thinking about public safety and the world of reactivity to problems and think how it could be proactive to reduce some of those challenges in the first place. We need to put more money into higher education, not incarceration. We had over 200 people released from our incarceration system at the beginning of COVID-19 that were clearly not a threat to society if they could be released. So we have this mentality of locking people up because of we need for bail reform. We have a need for revisiting parole and parole reform. Doug Kavett talked about Rhino Foods. I met with the owner of Rhino Foods and their HR folks. They have a full-time person working to bring folks out of the correctional facilities into jobs in Rhino Foods. And the parole system is such a hurdle for folks who can't get to their meetings because they're during working hours. So we need to be looking top to bottom in how we shift. Now, I agree with Reverend Al Sharpton with respect to his description of what defunding the police is in terms of adjusting and recommitting some of the funding towards things like community policing, towards investing in economic opportunities for all, towards more counselors for peaceful de-escalation as the state has started to do in Franklin and Grand Isle County and is looking to expand, and more social workers and more economic opportunities for working people who are struggling. If we can prevent the need for law enforcement interdiction, that's the best way to a safe society.
Great, thanks, David. Beth, can you address this question next, please?
I had to unmute there. So first, I would point out that as treasurer, I don't have appropriation authority as the governor and the legislature do. That said, however, I think that there are a couple of things that come to mind in terms of the problem and how we solve it. One, you take a look at our current figures in terms of the number of stops, the number of arrests, and the number of folks in corrections. and they are out of proportion to the number of folks, minorities in this state. It's just wrong. We need to fix that. We need to have a change in terms of our training of our force. When folks talk about safety first, I think that needs to be a priority. Second, I think we need to find restorative justice and alternatives. I'm going to quickly do, my deputy was at home and there was a break-in and entering charge against someone who came into his house. Instead of doing that, he worked with the young man to get him in a program in restorative justice, and he's now employed and doing very well. That's the kind of thing we need to do. Mentoring of people that are ex-offenders and coming out of prisons is so important. I volunteered for mentoring training for women who come out of the corrections the corrections system. It's not an industry. It's a frankly a black part of our state and our society that we have so many folks in prison.
10 seconds.
Yeah. And finally, I think that we need to work on finding ways to, if we do all these things, lower the cost of corrections. You can put that into need.
Great, thanks, Beth. Sorry for the cough. We're trying to keep these to 90 seconds or so. And that concludes more or less the prepared questions we've had. And we're going to start taking some questions from the various participants in this forum. I think Casey's going to go over some of those, the particulars of those questions, and then we'll get right to them.
Great, thank you so much. So what we will do is we'll give folks 45 seconds to ask their questions. If someone has additional questions and we have time, we'll circle back around. So the first is from, I believe, Ricky Rosati, and I think that they will ask it live if that still works. So Ricky, I'm asking you to unmute if you are ready to do so.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. My name is Ricky Rosati. I am the representative of Wantesca, and my questions include: what are plans to counter economic conscription, to decolonize, to decentralize the economy, and if any of the candidates oppose taxes on marijuana? And
so Ricky, can we start with one just for the moment, so that we make sure that all the candidates can formulate their responses one at a time?
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ricky, was there a specific, it sounded like there were maybe one or two questions in that first batch. Is there one that you would prefer they address right now?
I would like them to address all of those questions. And I have more questions, but I can stop at those for now.
Let's start with one just to really distill the topic.
They're all connected.
I have what you wrote to us in the chat. So if there's any candidates that would like me to kind of go over those questions, I'm happy to do that. Thank you, Ricky. All right. So
I apologize. I couldn't really hear the question. Could you just touch on what she was asking?
Absolutely. So Christopher, do you mind going through the question and then calling on the candidates for us so I can kind of keep track? Great.
So Ricky's question was, what are candidates doing to counter fascist democide by economic conscription? I want to hear them explain how they will counter economic conscription, enable decolonizing, empower decentralization, and develop direct democracy access. So we will go in the order we just went. So Anya, do you have a response to that?
Sure. small business is one of the most important things that the United States has, that independently owned businesses can flourish and thrive is something that I will focus on very hard in Washington, D.C. We also need to rebuild our agricultural economy and have that economy strengthened within our state and within our nation so that we can be independent of world food supplies. We do need to provide food supplies for our country on our own without being reliant. As the current epidemic has shown us, supply chains can be interrupted and having centralized agriculture can be very dangerous. So between small business and agriculture, I will focus very hard on working with both sectors to rebuild our economy and so that people can enjoy economic freedom through capitalist gains in market. Thank you.
Thank you, Anya. Doug, do you have a response to that?
Trying to get to my unmute. Did I unmute yet?
You are unmuted.
All right, perfect. So first of all, I did hear the taxation question about marijuana, and I think we just need to get on with it. I don't know what we're waiting for. You know, let's figure out a policy and a regulation that we're going to use, and let's start doing it. I mean, marijuana use has been going on forever, for a century, if not centuries, if not since the beginning of mankind. And we keep putting it off, and this is a great revenue source, so let's go ahead and do it. As far as decentralizing the government and let's have a more interactive government. We need to be able to contact somebody and have them contact us back. I mean, yes, we have representatives, but I can tell you, when I've written to them, I don't get a response, and that's not a very representative type government. So we do need to have that kind of decentralized government. What Governor Scott was doing with consolidating schools and taking power away from the local communities, I don't agree with that. Yes, we needed to, you know, save some money, and he saved it by cutting out the people that helped the most marginalized individuals in the school. So yes, there's a lot of different things. As far as businesses go, let's help businesses. So many people have reached out to me. I've been to over 150 towns so far, traveling around. And, you know, everybody is talking about the same things, and especially the small business owners, they need assistance. So yes, let's be more interactive and listen to
10 seconds.
Thank you, Doug. Ralph, do you have a response?
Answer, because it sounds like she wants in a sense, also a philosophical sort of worldview here. So I'll give her that in mentioning again that we continue to allot more than half of our federal budget every year to the Pentagon. This budget imbalance has skewed our productive capacity to lavishing resources on building a world-leading military-industrial manufacturing base. We have watched while China has wisely been investing heavily in medical supplies and solar power while de-emphasizing their military economy. If the federal budget makers would start, like China, directing more money toward developing domestic capacity in the medical and solar fields, the present military arms manufacturers would follow suit to go toward the new direction of money flow that China is leading in the right direction of the world.
Thank you, Ralph. Rebecca?
Hi, there's a lot here in this question. Just quickly, in terms of local governance, I do agree that when people feel that they're not heard locally, it creates a crisis of government. Part of the reason I stepped down from my position was because I was in complete disagreement with efforts to undo local school budgets after people had already voted on them. And I disagreed with the vision of the Scott administration for a single statewide voucher district. But I think the other issue that you're speaking to is the loss of opportunity. And when people have no opportunity, they're often forced to make decisions that aren't in their best interest. And what I am committed to doing is making sure that we do have good economic opportunity by investing in our local communities. I did this as Secretary of Education by investing in Farm to School, because we found that every dollar we spent on a local farm out of our state or school budgets added about 60 cents of value to the Vermont economy, but also strengthen those connections with our local farmers. And I'll do the same thing for energy. And I encourage people to go to my website, RebeccaHolcomb.com, because I put out recently some statements and proposals related to green energy, because we know currently we are the most dependent state just about on out-of-state energy. That undermines our resilience, and it undermines good opportunities for rural Vermonters in particular. And I think there's a real opportunity to bring some of those dollars back and put them into Vermonters, including in our rural communities, in ways that create wealth here, that and help people feel like they can live good lives and earn well in our communities. And that's going to be my commitment. We need to invest in our
10
communities
seconds.
to make sure that we can realize a good life for all Vermonters.
Thank you, Rebecca. Emily, do you have a response?
Hello. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Ricky, for the question. This is the whole pivot that I'm working to bring for everyone, which is that we develop neighborhood councils, people's assemblies, using the type of knowledge that comes forward in your generation who has brought forth the Occupy movement, the XR movement, the 350 movement. So you know how to work in assemblies and will work with Vermonters, because what everybody's been talking about is a continuation of the white man's idea of organization, of the white man's idea of business, the white man's idea of how we organize society. Well, there are profoundly wise ways that we're missing out on when we're only perpetuating this system. So when I'm opening it up to is to have the people sit together and to speak about what they know in their hearts and is possible. We have a society and a world that's been divided by hate. And so what I'm here to do is to help us to come together to work for a monetary system that increases our virtue. And we have to say, are we at the precipice? Are we going to go down this road further where we know it will fail us, or are we going to transform? And when you decide that we're going to transform and you make that commitment, it's a relief, because you know we're going to be trying something new that will work better in a peaceful way. So thank you, Ricky, for that question. And thank you for your work to bring
10 seconds.
indigenous names of the rivers and the places, the ones that we should be embracing. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Patrick, do you have a response?
Yeah, I think I'd like to answer at least part of Ricky's question. I think that marijuana should be legalized. I think that basically everybody agrees. And Dick Sears, who's my local senator here in Bennington County, made a proposal that we tax pot. And I think that's a good proposal. I think that we should tax pot. Massachusetts taxes pot, Colorado taxes pot, Canada taxes pot. And, you know, we're missing a huge revenue stream to support all of the progressive programs that I'm sure that Ricky is in support of. You know, these are problematic kinds of issues. And I do think that, you know, what we need to do is to talk to each other, to discuss things, but, you know, in the end, just get things done. I think that people are tired of not seeing things done. And I think this year is going to be a change election. I think everybody wants Donald Trump to go. And I want Donald Trump to go. He's, you know, and I want Governor Scott to go. I think that Governor Scott has been an impediment to a lot of the progressive issues and a lot of the creative issues make Vermont a better place. And that's what I would do as governor.
Thank you, Pat. David?
Well, I think Ricky brings up a really important question around sort of local control and autonomy versus state or federal control. One of the challenges we've been under for the last 40 years of trickle-down Reaganomics, originally Republican talking points and then neoliberal talking points of concentrating wealth into the hands of the few, is that somehow society will be better for it. When in reality, we've seen small businesses struggle, we've seen individual wages stagnant. It's the political connection with the corporate money and the corporate dominance that's really been the challenge in our society. But it's also really important not to throw out the whole system because of that. I talked to someone in Bennington the other day who was talking about racial disparities in policing, and she called me as lieutenant governor to see how I could get involved to help. If we go to purely local control, then minority communities and those without voices and fairness in their local systems are going to get squashed even worse than they already are. So it's a very delicate balance to just say, get rid of state government or get rid of broader government involvement in some of these issues around racial and economic justice. And I would just want to say that we really need to focus, by the way, you brought up cannabis reform, and I appreciate Pat Winburn's response as well. I've been involved with cannabis reform since 1996 when I was first elected to the legislature. Passed cannabis reform for medical use through a Republican House and a Republican governor as a progressive member of the House.
10
Working
seconds.
with people across all aisles, bringing people into the process is what I've done for 25 years, and that fits with Ricky's mentality as well, to bring people into the process.
Thank you, David. And Beth.
Got to remember that mute button. So thank you. So when I started my discussion or my presentation, I mentioned that one of the goals we have is for every single person in the state to have an opportunity for a lifetime of financial well-being. And you want it for everyone. You want it for yourself. You want it for your family. I want it for every single Vermonter and their voice in the process. And when we've looked at different initiatives, we tried to bring that voice to bear on the solutions. I mentioned the housing and the public hearings we had there, the local investment, the same thing. When we worked on clean water at the request of the legislature, we had 35 different sessions across the street involving 1,000 people. So we want their voice heard. Part of this is local investment and working to energize local communities. I believe that small business is the backbone of our economy, and our Green Mountain Secure Retirement Plan will assist small businesses in doing that. You know, for me, it's a combination of all those things. I would also point out that in my career, I talked about 42, 43 years of government finance. Some of those were in local. I was a deputy comptroller for a state. I worked with other municipalities, and I remember when I was 22 running for a local office, a representative to our small town meeting. So for me, making sure we have that balance, working with folks and looking at small businesses, local economies, and local government as a partner. I work with the Vermont League of Towns and other folks to promote that type of spirit of working together. And this is important for our future.
Thank you, Beth. And thank you, Ricky, for the questions. I know that there were more questions you wanted to ask, but unfortunately we have about 4 other questions we want to get through in the next 21 minutes. So I have a question for Douglas Cabot. Mr. Cabot, you were convicted of sexually abusing a child when you were an employee of a middle school. This is a severe betrayal of the responsibilities you hold as an educator and or para-educator, and a severe betrayal to the child you abused. And due to your conduct, a $1 million civil judgment was awarded to the survivor of your abuse. Given this, there's concern that you would be the boss of the Secretary of Education, and you will not have the Agency of Education's best interests at heart. How do you respond to that? You're muted, sir.
Okay, am I good to go?
Yep.
I can hear you.
Okay, so I've responded to this several times, and first of all, I don't give any credibility to any of this. It really is part of the whole criminal financial system that we really need to start looking at, where people are forced, coerced, terrorized into plea dealing 99% of the time. And all of this is a result of people just looking for money. I mean, that's really what it is. The reason that we have beds so full is not because we need people in jail. It's because the financial system requires those beds to be full. I was just a naive bystander at the beginning. I didn't understand what was going on. Lawyers would shush me. I mean, things that I didn't expect whatsoever. And then I started learning. I self-taught litigator up to the Supreme Court. I understand the law now. And, certain attorneys would disagree with me. But let me tell you, I have read so many transcripts and seen this theatrical performance between lawyers and judges and putting people behind bars. And then once they're behind bars, then the jurisdiction changes to the Vermont Department of Corrections. And all of those deals that were presented in court, unless they were ordered by the judge, they have no merit or value within that
10
system.
seconds.
So therefore, I don't give this any credibility. Nothing ever happened. And yes, it was, I was a victim myself, period.
Sir, my question was about the Agency of Education, but thank you for avoiding it. We need to move on.
Thanks, Chris. I have a question for Ms. Pierce. There are numerous and various diverse functions administered by the Treasurer's Office. Could you comment on some of these functions and kind of help people understand what the Treasurer's Office actually does?
Still working on that mute function. What I would say, we're pretty diverse. We have a number of functions. A lot of folks see us on the TV with unclaimed property. We avoid that during the election season, by the way, but wish other candidates would do that. But we do so much more. We manage $6 billion of money coming in and out after the appropriations of government. We take the residual of that and put that in short-term cash. We also have, beyond the 10% in Vermont program that's kind of an intermediate 5 to 7 year, we also have a trust investment fund where we have about 70 million. And we manage the 4.4 billion, although the market goes up and down on that, $4.4 billion of pension dollars. Now, we are not the sole trustee. That's an investment board, but the administration of that comes through our office, but not the full decision and asset allocation. We also do financial literacy. I'm very proud of that. And we look for ways to work together and collaborate with state and local government working together, looking at various reports that the legislature have asked us to do. They include clean water, connectivity, looking at housing. So we're very happy to work with the legislature on those funding and finance issues. We also manage the retirement program and the services for 60,000 plus retirees. And in the month of July, for instance, in the month of July, my staff processed 500 retirements for teachers and municipal employees in state. They worked hard, they care about their customer.
Thank you, Beth. We have a question from Mary Beth Fonda, who is here. Does Mary Beth want to ask her own question or?
Sure. Hi, I can ask my question. So I was just wondering if any of the candidates had ideas about how to provide more services to young adults with disabilities once they leave the public education system. I work with students currently pre-K through 12 with multiple disabilities, so they're the 1%. And currently, especially in Southern Vermont, I feel like the burden falls to families to find personal care attendants to fill the time of their children during the days. So I'm just wondering if you have any ideas on how to provide more services.
If nobody minds, I would like to answer something on that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, let's just go in the same order we just went with again. So Anya, take the lead.
Okay. Yeah. So this is a problem that we are facing in the state of Vermont, but also in the nation. And we do need to work very hard to provide more job opportunities where it's possible and the healthcare necessary where it's not. And I do also want to stress that we need to put more into research to try and prevent these types of disabilities from happening in the first place. So we do need medical research, and we do need to have programs in place to help these children once they leave the school system, as she was saying. So that is something that I care deeply about, and I'm glad that you brought it up today. Thank you.
Thanks, Anya. Doug, do you have a response to that question?
Yes, I definitely do. I spent pretty much my entire life working with people with disabilities and actually getting them into jobs and into internships and volunteer programs. And it takes a lot of legwork and it takes a lot of networking. And unless we have somebody that's designed to do this, we're not going to accomplish it in just a let's hope it happens kind of situation. I had a network that was huge. I could call on so many different people in so many different industries and so many different small businesses that I could always have a door open for somebody that had different challenges or different needs that they needed met while they were in an employment situation. And so it can happen, but we need people that are willing and dedicated to actually do that.
Great, thank you. Ralph, do you have an answer to Mary Beth's question? Not sure.
Something,
Sorry about that.
something I haven't done much research or study on, but I would have to say right at the top state level, you would have to have a sort of like clearinghouse that you can disseminate a date with data banks that you could put the information in of handicapped and disabled people that are looking for work and be able to make it fairly easy to reach out and find the sometimes unique situations in employment that's needed for this. So I think a centralized database at the very least at the state level is an essential thing to this, to helping people with disabilities. As far as the economics go and what's needed, I haven't studied on that, so I couldn't really comment on the economic side.
Great, thanks, Ralph. Rebecca, do you have an answer for Mary Beth's question?
Yes, I do. And Mary Beth, this is a topic that's really, really important to me. You know, certainly as an educator, I spent my life teaching in inclusive classrooms and have seen students, including students with disabilities, go on and become employed and live pretty independently, and felt really proud of the work that they did to gain skills and go out and be constructive, productive members of their communities and help us all in so many ways. There are a number of services, and you probably know that special education services can continue to age 21, and sometimes the secretary has permission to extend it a little bit more if that falls in the middle of the school year, to make sure that there's a smooth transition. And there's also partnerships, and I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but working with Voc Rehab, working with the Dale, to try to make sure that we're tightening the handshake and giving young people a workplace experience in a supported way so that they can transition to being more independent in the workplace after they've been supported and mentored through into that process, so that everybody who leaves and grows up, to the extent possible, can have something valuable that they bring to their community in a way that helps them feel like they're really part of the community. And to me, that's my measure of civility, if we give every single person a chance to be their best self as part of an inclusive community. I think we actually need to do some more work. I think that sometimes the handshakes break down between education and human services because there is a transition, and as that age transition happens, we transition between agencies. And I think there is work to do to tighten that and to think about how we provide seamless support for independent living and workplace support as well. But follow up with me, Rebecca at RebeccaHolcomb.com. I'd love to follow up and have that conversation.
Great, thanks, Rebecca. Emily, do you have an answer for Mary Beth's question?
Is this on me now?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, great. Yes, this is a huge economic burden on women who right now make on average $4 less per hour. So it ends up that the families are incredibly burdened. When you look at the idea of bringing up sustainability into neighborhoods and increasing the fabric of neighborhoods so that our fabric of the society is improved and our ability to trust one another is improved. But fundamentally, we need to go to our economic system and our monetary system to provide the amount of money that we need to do the things we want to do, and to look at outside of the box of what we can do. So when we're talking about creating villages or creating neighborhoods that are not only sustainable, but areas of trust, then we can begin to expand beyond the walls of our house to look to one another to help care for us. And of course, we can't just wipe away all the legislators and all the government that we have to collaborate, but we do need to bring the power of the people to bear so that we can move to an economy that uplifts our
10 seconds.
rather than continues to feed the elite greed on this planet. Thank you for the question.
Great, thanks, Emily. Pat, can you address Mary Beth's question next?
Well, I think that we need more funding for people with disabilities. The disabled are often taken advantage of. They're abused, and they're not treated very well by elements of our society. But I think it also points out the need for health care for all. Health care for all is not just a right; it's our moral responsibility. And I think that when Donald Trump gets the boot in November and January, I think Joe Biden, and it seems like he'll be elected instead of Bernie Sanders, which is not my choice. But I think that our senators, Senator Sanders and the others, Senator Leahy and Peter Welch, have also supported health care for all. And I think that we need full funding for that so that all of our citizens are treated fairly and equitably.
Great, thanks, Pat. David, can you address Mary Beth's question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. When I started my movie series to take up issues like 13th that I mentioned earlier, we also showed Intelligent Lives, both in Burlington, Manchester, and I believe one other spot in the state, to really highlight the need and conversation to make sure all people are included in our society, in their economic opportunities, and their dignity in living. And it's those kinds of conversations that I've been having for years to really shift the conversation from one of the bureaucracy is too big, we spend too much money on human services, to really the conversation around our collective responsibility to make sure we have a society that does collect the resources necessary, particularly from those who have those resources, the wealthiest among us, to make sure we provide the services needed, whether it's to help people get into homes and live independently, whether it's for job training and opportunities to create ideas like talked earlier with Voc Rehab and really expand that. This is a fundamental conversation about what is our collective responsibility as a society. And do you want a leader who's going to talk about this with force and with authority to say, yes, it is. And earlier was talked about universal health care. Absolutely. That's one of the reasons I'm moving with an agenda around universal primary care to make sure people get health care from the get-go with any issue they have, so things don't manifest into more difficult situations. And I want to end with a quick story, because I know I only have about 5 seconds, but I believe I'm the first statewide office holder and maybe even legislator to have Braille on my business cards, because we have to include everybody in the political process so their voices can be heard. And that's one.
Great, thanks, David. Looks like you're on a little time there. Beth, do you have an answer to Mary Beth's question?
I finally got the mute button done before you started to talk. So I would like to start with one comment that we talk about folks and we use different terms. I think the term should be individuals with disability. And I think that that's important. Handicap is not a word that I would use. I have a cousin who since passed away, but he was an individual that had a disability, and he, like everyone else, should be treated with dignity and respect. For me, this is about coordinating with jobs and housing. We talked a little bit about this in our housing initiatives, that we need to have special programs and support service built into it, just as we need to do in the economy. And they, like everyone else, those individuals, are part of our economic generator. We do have a program in our office I wanted to market a little bit as we talk. It's called ABLE, and it means Achieving a Better Life Experience. And there's a program for individuals with disabilities to put some money aside for the future, and it avoids the limits in terms of Social Security and other support services, that $2,000 limit. It allows people to work and put some money aside. It allows people that caregivers to put money aside. It creates independence for that individual, and it also promotes financial literacy. We think it's a great program. Call us or check out the Treasury website. We've got a great piece on that. And for me, this is about again, providing dignity and a chance for economic prosperity and opportunity for
Second.
financial well-being for every single person in Vermont.
Great, thanks, Beth. And thank you, Mary Beth, for the question. I think we have one more, which Chris will address, and then we should be close to wrapping this thing up.
We're about 4 minutes away from our scheduled end time. So if people could be, a little succinct with it, that would be great. But if it pushes us over a couple minutes, that's okay too, as long as people can stay. So question that was submitted during the forum was, some candidates have talked about many investments and ways to spend money to solve some of the challenges that have been brought up today, but they rarely talk specifically about how they will pay for it. With huge revenue shortfalls in state government, it is unrealistic to say that it can be done through efficiencies. What specific ways will you pay for all of that you propose? And we'll flip the list. So Beth, if you want to address that question.
Well, certainly, I do think that reallocation of resources is a part of it, and also looking for ways to increase funding. Many years ago, well, actually 2009, but that seems many years ago, we did a program in terms of bridges and this state and transportation issues. And we were able to do it with 10% of our dollars in it and 10% of the state of New York's dollars in it and 90% done by the federal government. And that was an innovative project. When we can do that, we can find revenue sources to do that. We also need to reallocate. We talked about prisons or correction industries. I get that word industries again there. I don't like it. It's a black mark on our society. But the bottom line is that by changing things, by mentoring, by providing restorative justice, we can free up dollars that can go into needed social services. So we need to be smart about our dollars. We can do more with those dollars, seeking both a combination of reallocation of existing resources and doing our best to take a look at ways to promote additional resources for the state. And again, our clean water report, we had a combination of that, and we are now doing an initiative, a program to assist municipalities, private sector, and the state in working through our clean water initiatives. That was a combination of existing and additional. I'm very proud of that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. David?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I've been very clear about the way that our economic system has led us to underfunding our basic infrastructure, underfunding our social services, underfunding broadband as we should be funding it now through a Green Mountain New Deal, where we could recapture some of the wealthiest folks' income that it keeps getting cut at the federal level to invest in the infrastructure of our economy for everyone. As those cuts have continued under Reaganomics and neoliberalism thinking, we have seen working people struggle harder and harder. Their productivity's gone up, but their wages haven't. We absolutely need to look to the wealthiest to help supplement the basic needs that we have in our state. We also need to look at areas that folks may have heard me talk about before, merging aspects of the Agency of Human Services and the Agency of Education with our kids and those families in those early years to make sure they have the support services from the get-go in order to really reduce the long-term impact of the challenging situations that some of those kids are in. I would also look towards maybe a temporary property transfer tax on higher end properties as we have out-of-staters buying properties, driving prices up, and that money could be used for affordable housing. That money could be used to make working Vermonters' lives more equitable in our society. Again, I'm not going to give you neoliberal talking points saying we can just save it through purely intergovernment efficiencies. We do need to reappropriate, but we honestly need more resources from those that have accumulated all the wealth.
Thank you, David. Patrick?
Well, I don't think that at this point with the corona crisis doing what it's done to our economy, that it's time for us to, cut programs. I think we need to invest in infrastructure and we need to, promote the, people from younger people coming into the state that, aren't coming because they don't see the state as a welcoming place. This is one of our biggest problems is the aging of Vermont. And we need to attract young people, but we need to attract them with good jobs, with wages that pay well and with benefits. And I think that a lot of the bigger companies can fulfill that role. But, you know, I run a mom and pop law firm in downtown Bennington. We pay for all of our employees' benefits, and it's a huge burden on the local economy and the local small businesses like mine. And I think that you know, we have to have a balance. There's no cookie cutter answer, but we need to go forward with a positive approach, and one that we think will benefit everybody.
Thank you, Patrick. Emily.
Hi, yes. I think this will be a good time to use the quote from Aaron Rothschild. Give me control of a nation's money supply, and I care not who makes its laws. Now, we talk about disabilities. Let's look at the people on this planet who control the majority of the wealth, and they have a disability, they have a sickness. And what it is known as is psychopathic or sociopathic, in that they are incapable of empathy. They are incapable of having a conscience. They may be extremely charming, but they are not like you and I. They are not generous. So when we need to look at the work that we need to do, we need to come to a place and say, we cannot continue to allow the value, which is our goods and services, not the money itself, to be extracted from this accounting system and sent to those who have a sickness, a psychopathy of not being able to have empathy. Because if they did, you'd see that they would have taken care of everybody. We would have everybody with a home. We would have food for everybody. They could do that with their wealth. But since they are not, maybe it's time that we come and say, geez, we need to learn how to issue money. Remember, money only measures the value of the goods and services. That is what is valuable. We can do that with a People's Exchange, a public bank, a common good payment system. We can bring in with a Vermont credit card. Talk to me. Let's do it. We've got to recognize the precipice. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Emily. Rebecca?
There's no question that our tax code is broken, particularly at the federal level. And the issue we really have is wealth concentration, even more than income concentration, and we do need tax reform. But I also think that there are things that we can do here in the state, and it is true that the wealthy do need to pay their fair share. However, we also need to make sure, because Vermont does have one of the most progressive tax codes in the nation, that we aren't undoing that progressivity with regressive spending. And I think that's a real issue in Vermont. We undo the value of taxing people who can afford to pay if we simply give them the money back while neglecting people who are really struggling to make ends meet here in Vermont. We also have to be more responsible, frankly, when we have windfall. The Trump tax cuts gave Vermont one-time money, a windfall. And what do we have to show for it? We're using our short-term one-time money instead of investing in a transportation fund, instead of investing in green energy transition, instead of investing in basic infrastructure so that the next generation doesn't have to pay for it as we've run it down. We've burnt it. And that's what we need to be doing, managing our resources smartly so that we actually get value, not just for us today, not just in the broadband that actually creates opportunity here, but for the next generation as well. And we also need to invest locally. And I've given several examples. They're more on my website. I encourage you to go to RebeccaHolcomb.com to see some of the things that we've been speaking about, because there are many ways where if we think smartly as Vermonters and invest in local communities, we can both meet our needs, but create great opportunities so people can live well in Vermont. And that's my priority.
Thank you, Rebecca. Ralph, do you have a response?
Whoop. Apologies. There we go, Ralph.
I guess the questioner wasn't listening to some of the responses that were given, particularly that I enumerated at the beginning. There are plenty of ways to raise revenue. It's all about the political will of the people who, like legislators who are responsible for this, and who they're listening to in the back rooms about certain questions of whether certain revenue raising legislation should be increased. I've mentioned it Increase the sales tax on low mileage SUVs and other gas guzzling vehicles. Raise the personal income tax rate on the top 5% of Vermonters. End the capital gains tax exclusion. Enact the financial assets tax. Put an extra a couple of pennies tax onto the alcohol and liquor beverage tax. It can be done. There's ways to raise revenue. It's all about the political will and whether the people in the legislative positions really want to do what's best for the overall population, or they're doing what's best for their friends. You know, like Phil Scott. His one mission is to take care of his friends in the business and corporate community. That's it. He doesn't care about anything else. So wake up and start seeing these things. They're right there in front of your eyes.
10 seconds.
Thank you, Ralph. Doug?
Yeah, like Ralph said, we have already discussed this, and so yes, we need new revenues. One of the biggest things that obviously I'm pro for the taxation of marijuana. Let's get it done and let's get it over with. I also think that, bringing businesses here, I see the people here as assets, not liabilities. Whether they're old, I still see them as great mentors that could help any other marginalized section of the population get going with entrepreneurship and whatnot. But I've also witnessed a city down in Connecticut, Stamford, Connecticut. And long ago, they had one, large building there, and they decided that they were going to rebuild the city and draw the corporate headquarters out of New York City into Connecticut. And they did so successfully. And that was, a really a vision-minded mayor that decided to do this. And I think we could do the same thing, especially with this COVID-19. It's offered us an opportunity. And I've already started looking into the top 10 companies in Boston, Springfield, Hartford, even Stamford and New York City. Why not draw these companies, these wonderful companies, and we can be selective as to which ones we want and draw them to Vermont, because it is the healthy alternative. We don't need to invite all the people in the world right now when
10 seconds.
But we can provide a safe place for great companies.
Thank you, Doug. And Anya.
Thank you. So I'm going to be perfectly honest with everybody who's listening here. We are going to have to make some very serious budgeting decisions to come out of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're going to have to make cuts in spending. Whether anybody wants to hear that or not, that is going to be part of what we have to do. We also need to bring more jobs, especially into the state of Vermont and into the nation in general, to generate more taxable income. When people are paying income tax, that is something that we need to focus on, getting more incomes to be taxed, not necessarily raising the rates of taxes on those who are already working. I hear a lot about people paying their fair share. The Lord only asks for 10%, so how much are we supposed to pay here on earth? We need to make sure that we have a large group of people paying a fair amount that covers our bills. We do need to reduce our deficit, and that's going to take cutting spending. As a young professional, I'm going to live with the consequences of my decisions just as you are. And I encourage everyone who's listening to me today, whether you agree with me on many of the issues that we've talked about today, you can't really afford to have socialist ideas predicting your financial future, for lack of a better term. You do need to have somebody who's going to be very fiscally responsible, and I promise to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Anya. And that wraps up the moderated Q&A session. We only ran over by about 10 minutes. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. And here we are.
Great. So thank you so much, everybody. I'll wind us out here. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here, talking about your ideas. As we said, thanks also to the young professionals that participated in the dialogue. We strongly encourage you to reach out to these candidates to discuss their ideas further. And so this concludes the event. And if either of the other moderators have anything else to say, so let's go for it. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and wrap this up.
Great, thanks. I just want to reiterate what Casey said. Thank you to all the candidates for participating. One of the things I think is unique about Vermont is coming from somewhere else originally is the kind of access we have to our local government and even access to the higher positions in state government. It's really unique to how Vermont operates. It's just really refreshing to have you all take the time out of your day to sit down and talk with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you for engaging as well to the young professionals. Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely. Reach out anytime, either as Lieutenant Governor or in the campaign at zuckermanforvt.com. Happy to keep chatting. Thanks.
Yeah, Pat Winburn, thanks for everything.
Take care, everybody.
So this is Beth, if I may interject just 1 second. 10% plus 10% equals 80%, not 90%. I need to correct my math. That's important to me. And it doesn't change the sentiment of the issue. And I want to say thank you for this opportunity. It was very enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you all.